Thank you all for joining us as part of the conference today. And thank you for everybody who filled out the poll. That helps me a lot to sort of custom tailor what I'm talking about. Seeing a whole bunch of beginners, which is awesome. This helped me target the session towards y'all. My name is Patrick Doran, and I'm with NCDIT, and I do work for the North Carolina Department of Transportation. I've been with the state since 2008. Been here a while, and have been working in the Microsoft and SharePoint space since about 2011. 2011, yeah, 2011. Been working with Power Automate regularly since 2020. That was just a big part of the M365 push that happened right around when COVID started. I lead a team of 12 folks who do various kinds of coding in the Microsoft stack and on the web in general. A whole bunch of them use Power Automate, so we've shipped quite a few Power Automate flows to our NCDOT customers, and it's proven to be a reliable way to take something very repetitive and automate it, which is just kind of the way things are moving in state government. And I think this is a helpful tool that many of y'all have access to. And I'm hoping I can just show you some of that today. This is a similar slide that I threw up last year. The demos are different this year, but this slide is the same. Because I like to frame it around why you would use Power Automate. Teams is very straightforward. You're chatting with people, you're sharing stuff. SharePoint is relatively straightforward. You're uploading documents, you're sharing list items. Power Automate's a little bit more, it's not quite as clear as why you would use it. But to me, it's about finding a process, finding a thing you do repetitively and trying to automate it. And the way that helped me think about, like, is it worth automating, is if you think about a typical state government career of 30 years. It's a heck of a long time. 1,500 weeks. That is a lot of time. So if you've got a 1-minute task, something you do every day, every business day, takes you 1 minute. Maybe it's emailing a status report, saving a document, updating a task list somewhere. A task like that over your career, it's going to take up 8 days, like 8 days of time, beginning to end. Is that worth saving, or giving the taxpayer 8 days of you doing something more beneficial with your time? So Power Automate isn't about identifying everything you do professionally and trying to automate it. It's trying to, I think, of more like the more mundane things you do, the very repetitive things you do. That's the sweet spot for Power Automate for me personally. So what is Power Automate? It's in your web browser. It is not a tool that you have to install necessarily. It's connected to you in your Microsoft account. So for state employees on the call, depending on what agency you're with, you may already have a Power Automate license that's part of your Microsoft account. Other agencies, you've got to talk to your tech support folks to identify that. But if you've got it, it'll be available when you go to office.com, and you'll see a Power Automate icon there. It'll be a little blue arrow icon. If you're unsure, talk to your Microsoft 365 support person in your agency. If you're in state government, jump on the Microsoft team that's been set up, the all things M365 group. And the people around there can get you connected to wherever your rep is. Another thing about Power Automate, it's pretty easy to get into. It's not a huge barrier to entry, and everything is very well documented online, which is nice. If you think about times you've used Microsoft Excel and you can't remember a formula, you can't remember how to arrange columns in a particular way or apply some sort of formatting, usually you can Google your way to an answer. Power Automate is very similar. A lot of that information is online. At the end of the slides, I'll include a whole bunch of links to Power Automate training that can help y'all get up to speed on it beyond the course of what we'll do today. Today, we're going to I'm just going to walk you through a few mostly beginner-ish level Power Automate flows, just to show you what's possible. Something to think about with Power Automate is who's going to use it. Is this a Power Automate that is for you, the employee, to automate one of your own processes during the day, or is it for a whole team of people? And Power Automate supports both, but what myself and the other M365 stuff like to remind you, if you build a Power Automate that is for your entire team, that Power Automate is tied to your Microsoft account. So it's important, if you've built essentially a system, a tool for your whole team, say it's a vacation tracker or a time off calendar or a way to track invoices, something you've built as part of SharePoint and Power Automate, or Microsoft Teams, Outlook and Power Automate, some of these, all these tools together. If it's for more than just you, please reach out to your M365 support personnel with your agency to help ensure that that tool remains there in case you leave the organization. Much like OneDrive, which is tied to you, the employee, same thing goes with Power Automate. So if you win the lottery and you're getting ready to head off to the tropics, and you're going to leave the rest of us in state government behind, make sure that the Power Automate flows that you build are properly shared, as far as ownership goes, and as far as permissions go and connections with these different services. Your M365 rep is here to help you. And I know the session is happening at the same time as this one, but right now Tim Muse from DIT is giving a session about Power Platform, which includes Power Automate now. Those videos will be posted live after the session. If this is a topic that intrigues you, make sure you check out that video as well. Tim will have a lot of good information on Power Automate and Power Platform ownership and licensing beyond what we're going to talk about here today. So I look at the Star Wars analogy, which is about as generic as it gets. Also shows my age to everybody. If you're building a Power Automate flow for you, that's the Han Solo. It's just for you. If you're building it for the whole rebellion, make sure that your Power Automate is shared with other folks in the rebellion, so they can use it in case you leave. All right. So I said Power Automate like 100 times, but what can you do with it? What can you connect to it? Your Outlook account, for sure. And that includes service accounts. So if your team interacts with a service account, you can connect Power Automate to that. SharePoint Online and OneDrive, for sure. And that's probably, to me, one of the more useful tools. If you've got a SharePoint library chock full of documents, or a SharePoint list that you're tracking things with, Power Automate works with that like peas and carrots. It's and we'll go through one of those in the demo coming. Microsoft Teams, we're all on it now. If you regularly need to communicate status or change about something, especially if it's in SharePoint or Outlook, Power Automate will let you connect it to Microsoft Teams. And that includes approval tasks. One of the demos we'll do today is a time off requesting tool that sends a Teams notification to your manager. So it's nice because if you're, you know who your managers are, you know how they work. Some are in Outlook all day, some are face-to-face, some are in Teams all day. If you need to automate a process where you work with them, Power Automate gives you a handful of ways to do that are pretty helpful. Microsoft Forms, which is a tool used all over state government. It's great because it's public facing. You can make a form that citizens can send information into. One of the demos we'll do today, we'll talk about using that. Microsoft Forms, Power Automate, and a SharePoint list together to sort of extend the capability of Microsoft Forms. Microsoft Lists, which is the standalone product, that is a sort of a nicer experience than SharePoint lists. We'll talk about that a little bit. And there's more. If your agency does work with Power BI, for sure that's available. OneNote, Microsoft To Do, it connects with a bunch of different Microsoft tools. And depending on how your agency is set up, your organization, you might have access to other Power Automate connectors outside of the Microsoft ecosystem. So talk with your Microsoft support person about that. How do we start a Power Automate? You want it to be something where you build this, you set it, and maybe you don't forget it, but you don't have to pay as much attention to it. There's more than here, but these are the three primary ways that a Power Automate flow will start. One is automated, and for our work here, that's the most common one we use. Power Automate listens to a SharePoint library, a list, your email account, whatever. It's waiting for an action to occur. It's waiting for a document to be uploaded, email to be received, an approval to be approved, something like that. So when you make a new Power Automate flow, automated is the kind you would pick for that. We're going to demo that later. An instant cloud flow is the second one there. And that one's nice because you can hook into Power Automate's mobile app. So there's a mobile app for your phone. And you can create Power Automate workflows that are kicked off. It'll give you a little button in the app you can tap. Maybe you're marking, if you're out in the field, you're traveling, your marketing process is done, you pull out your mobile app, tap a button there, Power Automate takes care of the rest. Third kind is a scheduled Power Automate flow. So if you've got a process that's time dependent, it's something that's got to happen every 30 days or every Monday at 8 a.m., you can set a specific time or a frequency for your Power Automate to run. So when you're building your own, thinking about this first will help you pick the right one. You're like, all right, when do I expect this to happen? Is it a human has uploaded a document? Is it because it's Wednesday? Somebody using a mobile app? It's worth thinking about that. And we'll cover this in the demo. When you build it, Power Automate is going to ask you which type you want right off, because that makes a big difference later on into the Power Automate flow about what options are available. All right, so how do we get to Power Automate? Office.com. This little tiny grid of squares, we call it the waffle icon. If you click on that, you should see the sort of blue arrow, powerautomate.com there. You'll see a whole bunch of blue on the screen, and we'll talk about this as we work through the demo. There's also a bunch of learning tools right on the homepage, which are great. We're only on this for 50 minutes. We'll only cover so much, but Microsoft's got a ton of other documentation out there. It's definitely worth diving into and checking out. All right. So I've been chatting for 15 minutes straight, so it's time to make some stuff. None of these will be like perfect, and none are guaranteed to work because it's a live demo. Kind of an anecdote, cautionary tale. Last year, I created a demo Power Automate flow that would email my boss and say happy birthday on his birthday. During the demo, I configured it incorrectly, and it started to email him every few minutes. My boss was out of town that morning and came back later the afternoon wondering why I had sent him hundreds and hundreds of emails wishing him a happy birthday, not on his birthday. So the cautionary tale there is when you're building with Power Automate, especially with your SharePoint documents, especially with emails, you're building in the real world. So think about, whenever I'm making a Power Automate, I always just email everything to me at first while I'm building it to make sure everything's correct. So before you add real people into the process besides yourself, thoroughly test everything you do. Don't be like me. Don't spam your boss a birthday message when it's not their birthday. All right. So we're going to try to do 4 demos in the time we got left. We'll see how that goes. First one, we're going to use a SharePoint task list to let them know that a task is complete. It's going to email me instead of my boss. I can learn a lesson. Second one we'll do is we will notify a team when a document's been updated. And by a team, I mean within Microsoft Teams. So if you're in your, you've got a work group, you've got a Microsoft team set up, you're in there chatting and sharing information, Power Automate can read another data source, maybe a SharePoint list or library, and update that team. So we'll cover that. The next one we'll do is using a Microsoft form and saving that data to a SharePoint list. That's one of my favorites. We do that pretty regularly with work for NCDOT. It's a great way to get data from a whole bunch of different people, regardless of whether they're in the organization or not, and pull it into a platform like SharePoint, where you can work with it internally, export it to Excel, sort and filter. You sort of get all the power of SharePoint with your data from Microsoft Forms. So we'll do that. And the last one we'll do, this is the challenge one. No guarantees this will work. But we'll set up a Teams approval workflow, and that'll be using a time off tracker. First, I'm going to check the chat. Do we have Excel Online Business available? That's a great question I want to point to real quick. If you're in the state government tenant, which a lot of the agencies are, Excel Online is considered a premium connector. So there's an additional license cost to that. There are some connections to systems that come with the existing license you already have. Some are considered special by Microsoft in a sense that they want a little bit of money for it. So Patrick, I will respond to your question with a link about that afterwards. All right, Dan, you're chatting about Power Automate Desktop. Yeah, that is another great tool that's sort of adjacent to this. Probably won't cover that in this session. David Hill, Power Automate AI tools. I'll share a link, but I don't have that either. And Mark Swan, you are asking about making things. Yeah, all right. So Mark Swan, you can build something for yourself, working well, and then talk to an SME about making it available to folks, beyond you. That's a great way to handle it. Sort of proof of concept it yourself, and then work with your IT support staff to make sure that it's supportable. If you win the lottery, that it's shared correctly. And something else you could talk to your SME with is error handling. So have you built your Power Automate in a way that's resilient? This is Power Automate. This is the landing page, and the URL to it is in the slides as well, but you can get to it through office.com. There's that waffle again. There's Power Automate right there. A lot of stuff about learning on the homepage, about bringing new users up to speed, which is great. The place I spend most of my time working is in this My Flows section. And from here, I can see all the flows that I've created, which are ones for me, which automate not personal, but like a process that's just something to save me some time. And I can also see the flows that I have shared or built, or my coworkers have built with me. So you may not see anywhere near as many of these, but the distinction between ones that are just my flows and ones that are shared with other users is important. You can see our one of the folks that works for me, Brian, he works on the hydraulics team, and he's in the process of automating some of their internal processes. And looks like he's using Microsoft Forms here. It's probably hooked up to a SharePoint list. And he has built it in a way where he has shared it out to other users on the team, so it's supportable and maintainable. So here's the first example we're going to cover. Let's tell the boss when a task is complete. And, that seems like something that kind of applies to just about everybody's job. Everybody's got a boss. Unless Governor Cooper's on the call, everybody's got a boss. And we all have to report on what we're doing. What I've got here on the screen is a SharePoint list. It's not all that exciting, but it's got a list of tasks and due dates. My boss in real life is not this picky, but depending on what level of detail they want, I might want to tell my boss that a particular task is complete. So, all right. So what I would want to do is change the status here. And my hope is that I can change it here and Power Automate will email my boss for me automatically. I don't have to do anything. Hey boss, this task is done. The email will appear to come from me because it's run under my Power Automate credentials. So my boss will know it's from me. It's not coming from, no reply at Microsoft.com. It really does come from me. I can actually see it in my sent messages in my inbox. But I don't have to, this will save me a minute every time I need to do it. So let's get started. So got a SharePoint list, got some tasks, we got a status. So first thing I want to do is I want to think about, all right, is this a scheduled Power Automate? I see dates, but it's not scheduled because it's dependent on me performing an action. It's not an instant one because I'm not pushing a button on a phone to initiate it. This one's an automated one. This is one where something has occurred, a user's taken action in a list or library or in an email. And when that action occurs, the Power Automate should run. So let's make that. So I'm going to switch back over to Power Automate. And I'm going to make a new one. All right. I'm going to pick Automated Cloud Flow. Definitely recommend you give it a name. You can leave it untitled and it will kind of fill in a name for you. But after you make 7 or 8 of these, you'll be glad you've given it a good name. All right. So I have given it a name. Now it wants to know the trigger. What is the tool? What is the system that is responsible for this? Is it an Outlook message? Is it a OneDrive file? But in this case, it's a SharePoint list. So we're gonna let's see if we can do SharePoint. All right, this is the one I want. Item. Here we go. So there are a whole bunch of triggers, a whole bunch of different conditions. Sometimes you want it to only occur or only run when a file's created and never again. Sometimes only when an item's modified. You can even add conditions to it to say, all right, only do it if it's on a Wednesday from Sally, and I picked the status of 3, something like that. You can give it really specific conditions. We'll talk about that later. But for this one, we're just going to say an item or file is modified. Click create. And that's going to take us to the screen where we really do the work. We define what we want to happen. If anybody on the call has kids who use the Scratch program, so these kids probably be in elementary school or middle school now, that sort of colorful widgets on a screen feel. This is a similar sort of way to automate a process, almost like programming. So there's a lot of color coding. There's a lot of fields to fill out. It's not typing in code, which is nice. So there's no expectation that you would be a programmer, have a computer science degree. Microsoft's hope with this is that professional workers with a computer can dive right in. All right, so I see my trigger here when an item or file is modified. So the first thing Power Automate's going to ask me is, well, where is this SharePoint list? And got my URL here. and it has an autocomplete here, and it's also got a list of recent sites. I'm going to pick that. So I know it's in this site here. And it's going to ask me for a list. So that list is our Automate demo task tracking list. Let's find that in the dropdown. Here it is. Okay. I don't need a folder because it's a flat list. And there are ways to filter the type of data you get back, but there's not this much here. So, all right. So first thing we've said is, hey, Power Automate, keep an eye on this list here. When something changes, do something. So the next thing we're going to want to do, Power Automate's got its eye on this list. It's watching it. When something changes, we now want Power Automate to send an email. So what we'll do is we're going to look for a connector. There are a whole bunch in here. There's an autocomplete tool to sort of search and find what you're looking for. What I'm looking for is a SharePoint list. I know that's under standard. Here it is right here. All right, now it's going to tell me all the things I could do with SharePoint right now. So Power Automate knows that something has happened in the SharePoint list. What's it going to do next? So I want to get the item. Here it is. So I'm going to click on that. All right. It's going to seem a little repetitive, but it's going to ask me again where to point to the list again, and I'll explain why when we get there. So again, we're going to pick our site. We're going to find our list. Now it's going to ask me for the ID. The ID in this case is which list item, which record, which one of these was changed. It could be any one of these, but we only want it to act on one. And it could be hard to figure out, like SharePoint has an ID for each item, but Power Automate makes it easy. And I'll show you. So I'm going to click in the ID box here. And see how this little box out here flies out to the side? This is helpful. This is sort of context help while you're building your flow. And I see ID here. This is the ID of the list item that Power Automate said, oh, this thing just changed. Pick that. All right. It's a good time to save. I've done a couple of things, so I'm going to save it. Got a save button here. There's also one in the corner up here. Give that a second. If I run it now, nothing will happen. Nobody's going to get an email. Power Automate's just going to listen in silence for list item to change, and then nothing will happen. So Power Automate knows a change has occurred. It knows which list item has been changed. And now we want to send this information in an email. So we're going to add another step. And we're going to use Outlook for that. I'm going to send an email. All right. And when you do that, it brings up a form that looks a whole lot like an email. Now, if you were building this for you and your boss, you'd put your boss's email address in there. I made that mistake last year, only once. All right, so I'm going to pretend I'm my own boss. But I could put, really anyone's address. Anyone who's in your Microsoft tenant you should be able to autocomplete, auto type their email address in there. And I better give it a subject. All right, so I don't want to just, I want the subject to be meaningful, because I don't know about your boss. Sometimes your boss doesn't read the whole message. They might just see, the subject line and be like, okay, that's all I need, and move on. So let's give it a meaningful subject line. So, all right, task complete. And you'll notice that this box popped out again. This is another place where we can pull in data from our SharePoint list into the email automatically. It's like it's a templating tool. It's if you've ever done a Word mail merge, similar to that. So here I can pick all of the columns from my SharePoint list. So I've got title, which is the name of the task, due date, status, and a few others that are hidden. So I think in my email subject, I want to have maybe the title, the status. Task complete title. All right, and you should see the little sort of teal colored widgety thing there. Is all right. So I picked the value, which is this one right here, status. I think it is. And the nice part about this box is that you can, oh no, I had the wrong one, not status value, status. These search boxes are great. They will help you filter through a lot of information quickly. All right, so I've got a good email subject line. I can put a message. Can use these same bits of information from my SharePoint list. All right. That looks great. So now I can save it. Now, when you save it, Power Automate's going to do, well, one, it's going to save it, which is what you want, but it's also going to run, it's going to look through your flow behind the scenes and call out errors or situations where things might get stuck in a loop, or even things where, like, if you're sharing data outside of your organization and there's a policy in place to prevent that, we'll call that out as well too. Something like this, it's looking good, everything's green. So says your flow is ready to go. We recommend you test it. Like, all right, let's test it. All right, so what I expect to happen is I expect to change the status and then an email to happen automatically. I'm gonna open my inbox here. Sure, there's nothing in there. It's like a magic trick, like showing empty sleeves first. All right, let's do it. So I'm gonna change this one from in progress to completed. All right, SharePoint says it's saved. That's good. Now I can go, once I've created the flow, it's got its own sort of landing page. It's got important details about whether it's on or off, last time it's been run, who owns it, things like that, the last time it's changed. It's also got a run history. So every time your workflow runs, it'll give you an update there, whether it's successful or not. And you can refresh it. Nothing yet. All right, it just ran. Good deal. So it tells me that this is when it occurred, about 7 seconds ago, and that it succeeded. So hopefully, by changing this item here, Power Automate has sent me an email. Hey, there it is. All right, so, oh yeah, I picked the wrong field for status. That's why I've got this crazy extra wording here. So this is why I recommend you always send it to yourself first, test it out. I think I probably had it right the first time. It was probably status value and not status. But here's that title. Here's the title of the list item, tending to be my boss, so it went there. So what does this mean? This means that in this list from here on out, every time a status is changed, My boss will get an email automatically. I've got to do this 100 times. This has saved me 100 minutes, things like that. So this is a kind of a base level example of what you could do with Power Automate. Lots more you can do. Bruce had a good question. Wouldn't I only want it to send it to my boss when that status was marked as completed? Yes, I would. And I'm hoping we could talk about that in the next demo. We'll talk about conditions. You're right, because I don't want to email my boss every time it's not completed. Nobody's boss wants to know that. And just make sure none of them are like my microphone is off or whatever. All right, so it's looking good. All right. Microsoft Forms, it's another tool that's part of the Microsoft 365 suite. If you work in state government, you probably have access to it. And it's a very common Microsoft product. What it is, it's a very quick way to make a form that can either be used publicly, anyone with a web browser can fill it in, or you can, isolate it to just internal, just folks on the tenant. When a user fills this out, when they submit data to it, it's stored in Microsoft Forms, which is fine for like a lot of things. Like if you're doing like, where should we meet for lunch, or send me your vacation availability, things like that. For small things, Microsoft Forms saves that data into Excel for you. That's fine. We found a lot of use with it in collecting data either from citizens or consultants who work for us, and then piping that data into Microsoft SharePoint. A lot of SharePoint use at NCDOT, a lot of folks familiar with it. Getting data like this into a SharePoint list is, it's a great way to make that data something they can analyze, something they can share and edit later on, or maybe it creates a task in a task list. So let's do that. Let's take Power Automate Forms and save them into SharePoint. So first thing we're going to need is a SharePoint list. Let's go ahead and make that real quick. All right. Make a list. And I'm just in my SharePoint site making a list here. Call it Power Automate Demo. All right. And what I'm going to want is a SharePoint list column for each of my two questions here. Again, I save this form response to SharePoint and my name. All right. Let's do that. Create some columns. One was my name. All right. So just a plain old SharePoint list. And I'll add a list item just for fun. All right, it's a regular list. But what I'm hoping for is to take the data from this Microsoft form, and anytime someone fills it out, have that go into the SharePoint list. So let's do that. All right, so I'm going to go to Power Automate. And again, I'm going to go to My Flows. There's the one I just made a few minutes ago. Because it is dark green here, I can tell that it's turned on and active. When it's this faded color, that means it's been deactivated. Let's make a new one. And this will be an automated cloud flow. All right. Now we want to choose the trigger. We want to choose what Microsoft Flow should be looking at, what event occurs to start this whole process. So I'm going to pick when a new form response is submitted. It's pretty nice. It's the first one there. And again, it's going to bring me to that screen where I can see the initial trigger here. It's going to ask me to pick a form. See if it's in there. Here it is, Power Automate Forms to SharePoint demo. All right, so we've told Power Automate that whenever somebody submits one of these, pay attention. And just like before, we're going to need to get that response. Get that form response. So I'm going to search in my available connectors here. Let's see if I can find Microsoft Forms. There it is. All right. So it's only one here, and it's get response details, which is, I think, a fancy way of saying get the answers that the customer, the citizen, put in the form. Let's do that. All right. Now again, it's going to ask me for the form that I want. I'm going to pick that again. And then it's going to ask me for that ID, which anything like SharePoint, hopefully it's going to tell me what that is over here. And it is. All right. So that's response ID. That's what I'm looking for. All right. Now I can save. Power Automate is running that sort of behind the scenes, looking over what I've put here, making sure it'll actually work. It's looking good. I see this green bar here. All right. So now what I want to do is I want to write this data into a SharePoint list, but I don't want to do it by hand. I want Power Automate to do it on my behalf. So I'm going to add a new step. Going to pick SharePoint. And what I want to do here is I want to create an item. Here it is. All right. Power Automate's asking me where do we create this item? Because even though we've got the list open in a tab right now, we know where we want to go, but we've got to tell Power Automate. So I'm going to find my site. And I'm going to find my list, which is Power Automate form demo. Here it is, Power Automate form demo. All right. Now, as soon as I pick that list, I'm hoping you saw it, it's given me these same boxes here, 2, 3, that are in my list. So that's important because that's where I want the form data, 1, 2, to end up in here. Title, I'm just going to say forms response. And you can see here, again, this response details, this is what these are the questions in the Microsoft form. So for can I say response, pick this one, my name, pick that one. Hit save. Power Automate's thinking. All right. So what I'm going to show you a little something different this time, and we are running up against the clock, so this may be it for today. But when I build one of these, if it's complicated, I want the chance to test it out. So this is a button over here that says test. I'm going to test it manually. What that does, that tells Power Automate to say, don't wait for anything. I am testing this. This is helpful if you're running a scheduled Power Automate, like you don't have to wait until next Wednesday to see if it works. All right, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna fill out this form. Yes. Submit it. All right, so I've submitted a Microsoft form. I'm hoping it ends up in this SharePoint list. See what Power Automate's doing. It's thinking, optimistic. Hopefully it's working. Nothing there yet. Come on, Power Automate. Put both fields into the same column of your list. Oh yeah, it's a problem with the flow. Oh, so because it's running under my permission, I had not used this in a while. I'm going to sign in again. That is updating. And this has to do with the fact that I was recently switched to MFA, multi-factor authentication, which is a one-time event. Let's go to that. Save. Sometimes you just got to refresh the browser. All right. Great item. Thank you, Joseph, for calling that out. All right. Name. Looks good. All right. We're saving that. Try it one more time. And then that'll be it. All right. So we submitted a form. Your flow ran successfully. That's exciting. When you use the test feature in Power Automate, it's going to give you that information right away. You'll see all these green checkboxes. This is handy information to see if something does go wrong, where it went wrong. You'll see a red sort of X when something doesn't work. And now in the SharePoint list, here's the one I just submitted. So there you go. Microsoft Forms using Power Automate to send its data into a SharePoint list. Now I can do things I can do. DocuSign or Adobe Sign. I can bring it to Power BI. All sorts of new options that weren't there under Power Automate. Weren't there under Microsoft Forms are now available to you. We're out of time. I don't want to make anybody late for the next session, especially Rod Parrish. He's coming up at 11 o'clock. We'll have a great session on SharePoint permissions. Don't miss out on, and I don't want to pick favorites because they're all good sessions. Karen has a session on Microsoft Forms this afternoon at 1, and Paula's got one on Microsoft Lists. Do not miss those. I wish I could add more time to get these other demos, but you just got to take my word for it that they work. I encourage you to explore. I encourage you to get in contact with your M365 SMEs at your agency. They just want to help you make good stuff to make you more productive. Appreciate everyone's time. I hope you enjoy the rest of the session, and have a great day. Thanks a bunch.